presentation on the appraisal of high-speed railways, the case of the Netherlands. Today we have with us here an invited speaker, or guest speaker you could say. His name is Lasse, and Gerrits. It's actually not pronounced this way. I butchered his last name. Let him pronounce his name later. So, Dr. Lasse is an associate professor at the Department of Public Administration at the Erasmus University of Rotterdam of the Netherlands. His research focuses on infrastructure development. One of his current projects is to analyze the reasons for the lack of success in the Dutch high-speed railway development. And without further ado, I'll let Dr. Lasse speak. And let me give you some game plan. So basically, the presentation is supposed to last around 45 minutes, after which there will be Q&A session, and Dr. Sumed will be moderating and taking in those questions. And along the way, please feel free to ask questions. And yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you very much, and thank you to TDRI for inviting me for this presentation. So I will talk a bit about the Dutch high-speed railway case, and we can have a discussion about what happened, about the project appraisal, focus on the project appraisal, and on the business model. We can talk about how that developed, what happened, and perhaps that can also help in the debate about the Thai high-speed railway case. So let's have a look at this. What you see here are the high-speed train sets that have been ordered for the Netherlands to run high-speed railway connections. And as you can see in this picture, there's one particular problem. The problem is they are not moving. They're all parked here, and the reason they are parked is that they have been grounded after 1 month of operation because they completely broke down. So the main question maybe here is, how come that a very expensive project that is supposed to bring high-speed railway to a country in Europe, how come that it failed completely to the extent that the trains have been grounded and cannot be used anymore? In order to explain that, I will look a bit at the project history. I will talk about feasibility studies in which some estimations have been made and how that translated into the business model and big financial problems. So that will be the structure of the presentation. Again, as said before, feel free to ask questions on the fly. I'll be happy to answer them. That's the program I just presented to you. Okay, so just going back in time, in the 1970s, high-speed railway became more popular, especially in France, Germany, and Japan, and it proved that with very high speed you could actually run viable train services. And this was also noticed in the Netherlands in 1973, resulted in the policy study, the Appraisal study, which focused on connecting Amsterdam and Rotterdam with Belgium. This is the map of the Netherlands. This is taken from that study so many years ago. I wasn't even born at that time. And as you can see, this is the country, this is the Netherlands, this is Germany, this is Belgium. This is the most populated part of the country, with the capital Amsterdam and Rotterdam here, the main industrial city. And as you can see, there were so many plans to develop high-speed lines to the north of the country, to Brussels and Paris, and also to Cologne and further into Germany, and also to run extensive high-speed lines for domestic services. And this study, the Appraisal study, resulted in a preliminary policy proposal in 1979 to connect the Dutch network to the European, the emerging European high-speed network. And as you can see here from this map, which I just took from Wikipedia, so you can look it up, this shows the current high-speed lines in Europe. All the colored ones are 200 kilometers or up. Red is 300, and the purple ones are even 310 to 320. This is where the Netherlands is, and as you can see, it actually does make sense to connect from Amsterdam to Brussels to Paris, or to the east going into Germany. It could be a vital part of the European network, and that was the main motive for starting the whole program. 1984 came the Paris, Cologne, Brussels, Amsterdam, PKBA, version, which was a further development of the previous study and focused really on connecting those cities. The reason was also that the German and the Belgian government also put pressure on the Dutch government to join. In 1986, the first feasibility study was carried out, and I will return to that feasibility study. And that feasibility study proposed 4 routes. Those were presented to the Parliament, and the Parliament accepted, made a principal agreement with the government to start a number of feasibility procedures. That is, to carry out the feasibility study, PKB, or planologische kernbeslissing in Dutch, group decisions about where the alignment, where the line should become, environmental impact assessment, assessing the extent to which building trains would impact the environment. And this resulted in 1991 in a proposal to build a so-called A1 route. So out of all alternatives, the government proposed to build this one, which is with 125 kilometers, the shortest route to the south from Amsterdam, going to Rotterdam, into Belgium and Paris, providing the highest average speed, but was also the most expensive one to build. And as you can see here on the map, here you can see all the alternatives between Amsterdam, Rotterdam, going through the densely populated area. And this is the A1 version. And as you can see in this map, again, Amsterdam, going down to Rotterdam, crossing the city, and then going south to Antwerp and all the way to Brussels and Paris. So this was the alternative that the government preferred by that time. Then we enter the phase where the construction work is standard and where it has become necessary to change the design due to political reasons. And I will return to that later on because that's a very important part in the story. The actual construction starts in 2000, and there are some problems there. First of all, lots of tunnels had to be built, and no one had used TBMs, the tunnel boring machines, in the very, very soft soil that is in the Netherlands. And basically, it's a swamp, and building tunnels using TBMs was very experimental, of course. That meant it was also very expensive and also running a lot of troubles. The second very experiment was the implementation of the European train control system, which by that time had not been fully developed, but the government decided to press ahead and implement version 2.0, which was underdeveloped, but supposedly presented the state of the art by that time. There were some problems also during the construction. Lots of land subsides, for example, underneath bridges that weakened the substructure of the tracks, and also construction loads were miscalculated. For example, they built noise barriers along the tracks, but when they tested the trains traveling along the noise barriers, they came off because they couldn't stand the pressure. There were other problems like that, but in 2010 the construction was finished, fully tested and ready for operation. One of the main bridges that looks actually pretty beautiful, but one of the pillars had come down, so that was one issue. This is one of those tunnels going under the in the very soft soil board, and then divided by half, one train in this direction, the other train in that direction. And the development of the high-speed train also led to redevelopment of station areas. For example, this is in Rotterdam, where I'm from. They built a new station with also a new platform for the high-speed trains. And following from this development, redeveloping the whole station area, new offices, hotels, and all that. So it brought a lot of redevelopment. Now let's have a closer look on what happened in the background. Understanding this story. How is Dutch rail organized? Now, first of all, this is the traditional way, so to speak. The Ministry of Transport here has basically two agencies to deal with. First of all, the infrastructure provider problem. This used to be part of the Ministry of Transport, but has now a fully independent status. They are the infrastructure provider. They have an annual budget to work with, and with that annual budget they need to deliver reliable infrastructure. The second agency is NS, Netherlands Railways. This is the main train operating company. This used to be a state-owned company. Right now it's much more independent, although the state still holds all shares in this company. Regional authorities, by mandate of the Ministry of Transport, are allowed to put out minor local lines out to tender, and they are operated by Arriva, Veolia and other train operating companies who again pay to ProRail for the infrastructure. So this is the traditional way of organizing the Dutch railways. However, in the case of the high-speed railways, this changed a little. The Ministry of Transport, again, here it is, put the maintenance and the design and the maintenance out to tender, and the tender was granted to Infraspeed, who for 25 years will maintain the tracks and make sure that it's available. The Ministry of Transport then collects fees from the train operating companies for the right to operate on the high-speed railway, and they channel that money back into Infraspeed to pay for the maintenance. Now, NS High Speed is probably the most important train operating company. This is a subsidiary of NS, Netherlands Railways, the previous state-owned company. However, this is a highly independent subsidiary within NS. It's partly owned by NS, but KLM Air France, the air company, also has a 10% stake into this. The second important train operating company is Thalys. Thalys is a joint venture from the German, French and Belgian state-owned railways. Also fully independent, operates high-speed railways, high-speed trains I should say, between Paris, Cologne and Amsterdam, if you remember the original version. And this is a new player with regards to the Dutch case. Eurostar has been operating trains from Paris to London and will from next year onwards start operating also from Amsterdam going to Paris to London. So this is how high-speed rail is organized. Now let's have a look at the business model for construction and maintenance, and then later look at the business model for operation. Originally, the goal was to, by the government, was to have the market pay for the whole project, because the project was deemed very expensive, and this is the early 1990s, and people in the government believed that public-private partnerships could solve everything. So the construction and the design and all that was put out to tender, to the market, but unfortunately for the government, no one was interested. So they gave no interest at all. Ultimately, the government understood through dialogue with market parties that the market parties thought that the risks were too high. And the government took the risk and built the substructure. So tunnels, bridges, all foundations were built by the government. Why is that? Again, very weak soil, many uncertainties about how the soil will hold in 50 or 100 years. So the government built that and took the risk for that. After they had done that, the market came back in and they offered to work on the tracks, signaling overhead. So the market offered the DBFMO contracts, which stands for design, build, finance, maintenance and operate. But only for the tracks and only for the signaling system, so the safety system, and only for the overhead wires. And as I already said, that concession was granted to Infraspeed for 25 years for about 100 million per year. And Infraspeed has to deliver a 97% availability of the tracks. That means unobstructed and safety operations for the trains. I already mentioned that during the construction of the signaling, there were so many problems with the signaling system, the European train control system. Basically, the government said that the market should deliver that. Siemens, who was going to deliver that part, was part of Infraspeed. But then again, Infraspeed came back to the government and said, well, you have to make a principal decision what kind of standard you wanted to use. And that lasted way too long. They kept talking with each other, but meanwhile the tracks couldn't be used. Right now that has been settled, and this part of the business model works quite well right now. Now let's look at the business model for the operations. Again, the government wanted to do tendering procedure and put it out to auction. However, due to political pressures, media, stakeholders, there was a clear preference for having Netherlands Railways NS to win the auction. So there couldn't be any auction because NS by that time was still a state-owned company. So the government offered multiple times, offered to a negotiated contract with NS. NS believed that they could win anyway because they were the state-owned company and they believed that they were the chosen ones. However, by that time the minister thought that they had made unreasonable offers and turned NS down. And this is a very important point in the history of Dutch railways because NS always had been the sole provider of railways. They had never foreseen that someone else could come to their market. So 2000 is the start of the official auction where the government has turned down the offer of NS and has said that other people, other market parties should also offer money. And I'm going to change the microphone. Better? Okay. Good. This resulted in 4 serious offers. Of course, one from NS, another one from Virgin Rail, there was one from the Swedish high-speed company, and one from Deutsche Bahn from Germany and Arriva that were together. Most of the offers the market proposed were about 100 million euros per year, which was something that the government kind of expected. NS, by that time, was really afraid that they would lose the concession to someone else. So they made an offer which was 16 million euros higher than the other offers. Of course, this was accepted because that looks much better. You know, this meant that the government could make 60 million euros per year more. However, already that time the government was kind of afraid that NS couldn't do that. So they lowered the offer back to 148, but which was still much more than others such as Deutsche Bahn had offered by that time. Over the years, NS High Speed have never delivered that. So instead of paying that money, they went bankrupt 3 times in a row, and I'll explain a bit later on how that happened. And the current situation is that NS High Speed is definitely bankrupt, and the European Commission is now looking into the legal aspects, the extent to which it was allowed, the government is allowed to help NS. That's the current situation. Now back in time a little, this is the moment that NS has won the contract and starts the tendering procedure for the train manufacturing. Again, this turned to be very difficult. NS had paid a lot of money for the concession, actually much more than it could carry. So it meant that for buying the trains, it had to cut a lot of budget. There were 4 candidates: that's Siemens, Alstom from France, Ansaldo Breda from Italy, and Bombardier from Canada. Of those 4, only Alstom and Ansaldo Breda managed to make an offer. The other 2 candidates thought that it was completely impossible what NS wanted. This is, for example, what Siemens offered. Their existing platform reworked with different looks and for higher speeds, but NS really demanded, especially made high-speed trains that were still very cheap, but could also run on very high speeds. And actually no one was able to offer that. And just 1 day before the call closed, Ansaldo Breda popped up and offered a new train that could run 250 kilometers per hour, and that was very cheap. It offered the lowest price per seat, which was the main criteria, and that meant about 20 million euros per train, which was about 10 to 15 million euros per train cheaper than the competition. There were a few problems, however. First of all, they had never built such a train, so it was all on paper. And the train had to be designed on the fly while working in the factory. In the factory, they kept adding new things to the trains. Secondly, Ansaldo Breda had lots of problems with the train control system, with electronics, with crash safety. As you can see here, they did some tests and then they added the strange-looking nose in front of the train because that was the only way to make it safe against crashes. Altogether, the trains were delivered 5 years too late. Here it is. So, remember the bridge? There's a train. And this is a good picture because it's one of the very few times you could actually see the train running. Just show you a graph between Rotterdam here and between Amsterdam Airport here, just to show you that the track had been optimized for 300 kilometers per hour, but there's no case for that actually. Trains, even if they accelerate very quickly, only reach 250 just before, for about, that's around 4 minutes of actual high speed before having to brake and slow down for the station. So the case for 250 kilometers per hour was actually quite good. 300 was not necessary, but the track is all optimized for 300 kilometers per hour, and one could say that's a waste, because that's meant extra construction works for speeds that never have been reached. 2009 saw the start of the concession, which coincided with the delivery of the first prototype of the train. However, the prototype was not fit to run at all. As I mentioned before, there were 5 years of delays. So NS had to do something else, and they started leasing extra trains from another company, which could not reach high speeds at all, but that was the only way to keep working on the concession while waiting for the delivery of the real trains. This is the first moment in time that NS high speed went down. Why is that? They kept paying 148 million euros per year. They had no trains to run the service. They had no passengers at all. At the lowest point, they had 5% of the seats sold in one trip, and that's really, really low. So this is the first time they went down. Government stepped in, saved NS by renegotiating the contract and lowering the annual fee to 110 million euros. It's still a lot. Again, in 2011, no high-speed trains available yet. Revenues still very low, and also the number of passengers also very low. Why revenue is still low is because they tried lowering the ticket price in order to attract more people. More people came, but then again the revenues coming from those people didn't cover the losses here. So NS High Speed had to be saved again, renegotiated the contract, lowered the annual fee that they had to pay to the government. Then we move on to 2012, where the fee to 250 was finally done. It was introduced in December, and in January it was cancelled. The trains turned out to be so bad that they could never run a service with that, and that was the final time that NS went down. These are very famous pictures in the Netherlands. I love to show them to you also. What happened, this is from a report that was leaked and is now out in the public. When the train drove on the tracks, the roof came off, the doors came off. This is how it was repaired. These were supposedly good wires which started to come down right after using it. It happens to snow a lot in northwestern Europe, but the train couldn't stand the snow. This is the under trays coming off at high speeds, the protection layers coming off at high speeds. And these are the batteries that caught fire. Luckily that time the train was in the shed, so no one was there. But it just started to burn for some reason. So you could say that having such a cheap train really is not a good idea. This is the stand-in train that's being used right now. These locomotives, old carriages that have received new painting, but actually still quite old. So let's have a look at the numbers then. So you now know how it ended up, and then now let's have a look at the numbers in more detail. First of all, as for the construction cost, 7.1 billion euros with a budget overrun of 3.8 billion euros. So the cost estimation really was very wide of the mark. Track maintenance, originally scheduled at 100 million euros, turned out to be 180 million euros. The trains, that's 380 million euros down the drain, and an unknown amount, I could not find it, that went into the repair and into the lease of the alternative trains. There are some revenues, 101 million euros per year from NS and from Thalys, and as I mentioned before, NS was saved by the ministry. This is all bad news. I should also mention some good news. Thalys, who runs the train service between Amsterdam and Paris, actually does quite well. Ridership is 85%, which is pretty good. and they are now expanding the services. So Thalys is the exception here. And these are the number of passengers. And for your amusement, I have compared them to the expected number of passengers and the actual ones. And as you can see, the expected for domestic was between 8.5 and 9.6 million passengers per year. The actual outcome, well, you can see, even in the best of times, doesn't reach 900,000 per quarter. So you could say that it's less than 50% of what was expected. As for the international number of passengers going to Paris, it's slightly closer to the expectations. The black line is slightly closer to the expectation, but still nowhere as high as it was expected originally. If you look at these numbers, the losses that have been made, the low ridership, problems with the trains, you could sense that something went completely wrong in the project appraisal. So let's have a look at how the feasibility studies were carried out, the results that were generated, and why the decision was made to go ahead regardless of what happened. Back to 1987. When the agreement was made to carry out the study, to start the procedures, a number of things had to be done. First of all, that BKB, the formal feasibility study, had to be done. It consists of social cost-benefit analysis and product specification. What it should look like, what we're talking about, what's high speed, 250, 300, all that kind of questions had to be answered. The second part was research into the alignment, the decision that had been taken regarding the route. Different alternatives had to be assessed, and the land acquisition had to be prepared. The third part was the environmental impact assessment, where the high-speed train had to be assessed against other modes of transport, and where the high-speed train had to be assessed in terms of the impact it had on the environment. These feasibility studies, this whole procedure with all these steps, are all out in the open in the Netherlands. So everybody has access to them, and the public can comment and can even object. Mostly this was done by regional authorities who own the land through which the train would run, and citizens who were directly affected. As I mentioned before, the high-speed train runs through a densely populated area, so many people were affected by it. They had train coming through their backyards, and they could look into the documents, and they could tell their objections to the government. And this happened a lot. And the result was that the first round of study was completely rejected. So the parliament understood that the first studies were not good. Citizens who took the government to the court to talk about the impact assessment were also granted the rights, and the court decided, also together with the parliament, decided that the first round of studies were really bad. Why was it bad? First of all, it was not clear why a high-speed train was necessary at all. So the government just had thought that they wanted to build a high-speed train, and had just looked at the measures that were necessary in order to build that. They had never looked into other alternatives. Other alternatives could be, for example, upgrading of existing tracks. Again, this highly densely populated area already has a very extensive railway network. So why build another one? Why not just upgrade the existing ones? The third reason why it was rejected by court and by parliament is that there were not enough guarantees that the money was there to build the whole thing. The government said it was going to cost 1.4 billion euros, of which it never had half of it somewhere in their planning. The government then said that half of it would have been paid for by the market, but as we have seen, there was no interest in doing that at all. So in the end, the first round of studies was rejected, and the government was sent back to redo their homework. This is round two. In round two, the utility of building a high-speed train was not proven at all. However, the studies became more realistic in the long run. For example, a counter or second judgment was done by McKinsey, who showed that upgrading the existing track would lead to a net present value of 0.4 billion, partly new lines would be minus 1.3, and a full high-speed train would lead to minus 2.1 billion euros. So actually they showed that building a high-speed train would never be feasible if you want to make some money out of it or not lose money at all. Basically they argued that upgrading would have been a much better idea. And interestingly, they showed that the more the Netherlands would build a high-speed train, the more other countries would profit from that. So the most expensive version was very good for France and Belgium, but not for the Netherlands itself. The cost-benefit ratio also changed. For the project, it turned out to be 0.9, where it had been 1.4, and for the wider economic impact, it turned out to be 1.4, where it had been 1.7. So the studies became more realistic. Along the way, exposing the plans to the public also meant that the scope was extended. So more alternatives were considered because people keep putting new alternatives on the table. One of them was the most important one that had been considered, is called the Bos variant. This is developed by one man, an engineer, who developed a complete plan for upgrading existing tracks. And it became very popular, and it was actually considered in the whole project. And also additional measures were taken. A very long tunnel was proposed in order to protect nature conservation areas. Again, it helped gain political support, but it also raised the cost, of course. In this graph you can see the cost estimations resulting in the first round, and then up to the final assessment in 1996, as you can see, become much more realistic. However, not realistic enough. As you can see, this is the actual building cost, still much, much higher, almost double as high as expected before. So as I said, in this second round, stakeholder consultation, the public led to scope change, but still some reports were withheld from the parliament and the public. And this is highly controversial in the Netherlands, and it led to inquiries in parliament. The government kept presenting optimistic scenarios as the most likely outcome, but as you can see, each time more studies were carried out, the project seemed to be less and less feasible in the long run. And much criticism went into these things. The fact that the country had no material, no reference material with which it could compare its own assessment. So there were no high-speed trains running in the country, so they had no idea what the direct revenues would be, how many people would skip flying by airplane and going by train. Same goes for the wider economic benefit, and as you just saw, the same went for passengers. There were very optimistic prognosis about how many people would use the train. In the end, that never happened. So why was the decision to build taken? So why building, even though everything shows that it wouldn't work? Lots of additional studies were done, and none of them were really decisive because they used different economic models. So the outcomes would vary from one report to the other. And for this presentation, I went back into the archive, looked into all the different models, and really it's very hard to tell which one is the one that should have been believed. More alternatives kept entering the decision, but the government by that time had switched to a completely different track. It was not going for reason, it was just going for the idea that the country had to have a high-speed train, regardlessly. So it decided to stick to the most expensive version, and ultimately decided to threaten to resign if the parliament didn't accept the decision. The parliament was undecided, but it could be persuaded, and it was persuaded by handing out sweeteners to members of parliament, for example, investing some extra money in another region of the country if a member of parliament would accept the decision to build. And the very interesting thing is that this whole process lasted for 20 years, the feasibility studies, the planning process. This whole thing, one day. Okay, so political pressure, lots of things going on, newspapers that keep asking questions, and media coming on, and ultimately, at the end of the day, in the midst of the night, Parliament decided to vote in favor of building the high-speed train. So, our conclusions for here. First of all, very important conclusion, I think, is that assessing such a complex project really takes a lot of time and really requires lots of many studies and many ideas to be tested. The errors that have been made a lot were, first of all, the optimism bias, the idea that it would work out anyway, just to take the risk, just to jump into the unknown and try and do it. The second mistake was that there was very little room for flexibility. Right from the start, the government decided it should be a high-speed train, it should from Amsterdam to run from Amsterdam to Rotterdam, and never considered upgrading or any other alternative. So narrow focus. Another error, no comparisons were possible. There was no reference material. They used some numbers, for example, from Paris, from France, but France is a completely different country from the Netherlands. And another error was that many assumptions had been made about what would happen. There was no real hard evidence for that. One error that is very hard to prevent, but which is still very important, is that when the calculations were made, no one knew what a low-cost carrier was. It had not arrived in the Netherlands yet. By the time the tracks were being built and operation started, which 15 years later, low-cost carriers were all around and everywhere. And they took out a lot of passengers, offering trips to Paris for 20 or 30 euros. One thing that I find very interesting is that reading from the reports, the Prime Minister at one point in time said, there's actually no one who understands the whole thing, so we just go ahead. And as I mentioned, politics here really over reason. As for the conclusions for the business model, we can see that there were very different expectations between government and market. The market being much less optimistic and seeing much more risk than the government did. As such, the tendering of the construction really failed. Market didn't want to carry that risk, and also, very importantly, there were very limited parties who were actually qualified to build a high-speed railway. So the question is to what extent there was actually competition on that market. There were maybe 3-4 companies who could do that, and they could decide among themselves who would do it. There was no real competition. The tendering of the operation also failed. First of all, because it was granted to a non-market party. As you remember, there was a lot of political pressure to grant a concession to NS, the previously state-owned company, instead of putting it out to the market. NS had no idea how much, they had no idea the value of the concession, and that's why they offered 160 million euros. The other market parties were much lower. They were approximately the same, between 90 and 100 million euros. So you could see that NS, being not used to competition, just made the wrong estimation. They negated this by cutting costs everywhere else, and most importantly in their services, and by buying very cheap trains to run. At one point in time, the results were so bad that NS as a whole, not just NS High Speed, but as a whole for the whole of the Netherlands, was threatened. So that's why the government had to step in here and save the company with tax money. So this is the conclusion of the business model. As for the conclusions of the high-speed train, I think the picture says everything that you need to know about this. Don't buy trains from Italy. Okay, this concludes my presentation. I thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be happy to take your questions. Thank you very much.
Before we start with the question, if anyone would like to ask some questions, probably good to clarify yourself first and then ask the question. Anyone? Yes? Okay.
Hi, my name is Gerrits from TDRI. So I have a question regarding to the demand for this high-speed train and the existing train, and also the low-cost airline. So has building this high-speed train increased the demand for train travelers?
Well, thank you for letting me clarify it, because I forgot to mention that. Actually, not really. It's more like a substitute. So what has happened is that there was already a good connection between Amsterdam and Rotterdam. It took longer than the high-speed train, only by 20 minutes. So people kept using the normal train because it was slightly cheaper. It's slower, but 20 minutes is, it's acceptable. If you can save money with it, that's still acceptable. So people kept using the old trains until the moment that NS cut down the old line and basically forced people to use the high-speed train. But that is just substitution, so that didn't create any additional passengers at all. As for the low-cost carriers, I should mention that NS High Speed is operated by NS and KLM Air France, the air company. They have a very powerful position in Amsterdam Airport and in Paris Charles de Gaulle, and therefore they can prevent low-cost carriers from operating too aggressively between those two destinations.
Probably I can ask some question also.
Sure.
Yeah. Looking at your passenger number that you predicted and also the data that turned out, probably is quite very surprised that how the Dutch can go this wrong on the estimated number of passengers, because what I can see is that they expect that the domestic passenger would be around 90% of all of the things that all of the passengers that use the high-speed train.
Yeah.
But it was turned out that the domestic passenger is lower than the international passenger.
Exactly.
And just like to say it in the percentage way, for the domestic passenger, it's just only 10% of what you are estimated, and for the international passenger, it's just get slightly nearly there.
Nearly there. Exactly.
So,
yeah.
could you explain more about this? Why that go wrong? Because I think, in a way, the Dutch should have sort of a lot of marketing research, a lot of survey, and the thing that the model that would really prevent this kind of thing.
Yeah, and that should be the case. So there's a number of things that happened here. In no particular order. First of all, optimism bias. There had been warnings that it wouldn't happen, but the government decided to stick with the most optimistic scenario and presented it as the most likely scenario. That's one thing. Second thing is, this is the early 1990s, late 1980s when this was done. Population still grew very quickly. By now it has sort of flattened. But that time they basically made a linear projection, exactly, thank you very much, projection of what will happen right at that point in time. And later on demographic development, urban development went in a completely different direction, and therefore the case became much worse.
Is that also in terms of the price mechanism, is that the high-speed train is much more expensive, so that people are not using that?
Yeah, so in the Netherlands, we are used to using trains as hop on, hop off, as you do with a metro or something. The high-speed train was built on the assumption that people would reserve seats and they would pay a premium, and that's €7 between the two cities in one direction, on top of the normal price or of 8.5 euros. So that's a very steep price hike. And people were not willing to pay that at all. And that's why the empty trains. Later on they lowered it from €7 surcharge to €2 surcharge, which is when the number of passengers went up a little. I can show you that exact point in time. So this is when people had to pay €7 surcharge. Then it was dropped to €2 and it went up. So you could work with price here, but then again, €2 premium for such an expensive project. It may work with the market, but it doesn't cover the cost of running such a project.
Yes, isn't the whole problem with this thing is that the distance between Rotterdam and Amsterdam is too short? It's 125 kilometers. The best way to travel is to drive a car. It takes you 1.5 hours, door to door.
Yeah.
So really, I mean, the concept from the start was not thought out properly. Basically, maybe in the Netherlands, if it had a high-speed train, then the main benefit is to connect to other countries.
Yeah, exactly.
And as you mentioned, the McKinsey study showed that, in fact, other countries benefit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it should have been conceived as a European project from the beginning.
Yeah.
To travel across to other countries, Paris, as you say, they're doing reasonably well.
Yeah.
Because as you said, struck that the train could only achieve 250 kilometers per hour in 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Yeah. So approximately this
So
section.
what's the point of having that? Right?
Exactly, I fully agree with that comment. Absolutely, yes. So by the time the train has reached the high speed, it has to start to slow down again. I fully agree. And as for the short distances, I think this is very important that high speed rail only works in medium to long distances, but not in short distances. And this was, I think, a big mistake in the planning process. The country is just too small for running its own network.
I always think of Amsterdam, not Rotterdam, one city. So then I was on and you went there another. I do the rating to me.
I fully agree again. You know, the regular railway network between those cities is pretty good. And it runs like a metro. Every 5 or 10 minutes there's a train between the big cities. And it works fine, like one metropolitan area. So cutting through it with a high-speed train that skips a number of stations, still runs in a short distance, is perhaps not the best idea. I fully agree.
Anyone? Please.
But the European high-speed train, isn't there any European high-speed train that goes from Cologne and other places that we mentioned?
Yes, there is.
With trains in Amsterdam.
I'll just look at the map again. So what happened now is Thalys is running this service, Amsterdam to Paris in 3 hours. This is hugely popular.
Via Rotterdam.
Via Rotterdam, yeah, using that same track. And this is hugely popular. So Thalys is doing rather well.
Amsterdam to Rotterdam.
We just want our train. I understand your comment and I appreciate that. And I think it really is just the idea of having your own train with your own logo, your own brand. Remember when France presented their high-speed train, it was presented as a project of national interest, national pride, and that was, I think, part of the atmosphere in when it was decided to build this one. Again, Thalys is doing well, and Eurostar has made a business case to run from London to Amsterdam, and that business case seems quite good, and they are going to do it next year. Unfortunately, the connections to Germany, that's not going to happen anytime soon, because no one wants to do this once more again. So such a project.
It seems to be the only nationalistic feeling that was expressed finally was that last picture of yours.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it actually. Just for our own amusement, I just put it back on the screen. There it is. Actually, it says here, their food may be good, but don't buy the trains from Italy.
I have some question regarding the feasibility studies. You mentioned that during the last decision that the government made to build this high-speed train, so there were like many economic models or different models for using the feasibility studies.
Yeah.
So I wonder, like as of now, do you have any concrete model that you use as a reference for the near future, whatever? Just curious.
That could be. Right at the moment, no one is looking into doing another such project, so I'm not sure that it will be developed right now. That time there were at least 3 competing models that have been used by 3 different agencies. None of them were decisive, and people kept shopping between those models, taking bits and pieces from each model to say, well, look, this model proves that, and that model proves this. But there was no unified model, and I think if we were to develop such model right now, we perhaps could do it with this knowledge, but it's not there yet, so we would have to develop such a model ourselves. Of course, we have learned now how to do it, or how not to do it.
I'm interested in the bidding prices
yeah.
that were offered. I tell you this, the number 160, this is what the companies will pay the government.
Yeah.
Not what the government will pay the company.
The companies would pay to the ministry the right to operate on a high-speed track, and from those revenues.
So there is something that the economists call the business curse. That's one possible strategy. And the other one is for them to pay a high price anyway, expecting that eventually the government will get it out.
Yeah.
Which will be good.
So what happened is NS probably believed that they could do it, accepting or believing that they would have been pulled out if something went wrong in the long run. I think they've done. I think they counted on doing that. But that, you know, back in those days, you have to understand it was not obvious. NS was a very strong party by that time, and people really believed that they could do this. They really believed that they could outbid Deutsche Bahn or Virgin Rail and do better. And NS actually had a big stake in a telecommunication company, and they sold that stake so they would have enough cash reserve to pay for the concession for the first few years, because they accepted that the first few years would be a loss anyway. That's what their estimation was. As it stands now, there is a big debate going on regarding the position of NS in the Netherlands. I think there are lots of sentiments to bring NS back into full state control. So to take it out of the semi-market on which it operates. But this is just a debate that's going on since I left for Bangkok, so I don't know the exact details.
But except for this high speed, NS is an efficient organization.
It usually is, yeah.
This is one disaster.
This is their biggest disaster. Actually, they make money on their lines, so they do well in general, generally speaking. Yeah.
Could you please clarify about the station of this high-speed train? Is that only 120 kilometers is just a section from Rotterdam to Schiphol, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that is just only one station from one to another.
Yeah, that's Amsterdam Airport actually to Rotterdam. Between Amsterdam Airport and Amsterdam is just normal tracks.
Just a normal
There's
track.
no room to build anything high speed at all.
So, but actually, let's say the time traveling advantage would come from this section from Schiphol to Rotterdam, and also come from Rotterdam to Antwerp.
Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
at the later part, actually has been run by NS, right?
No, from Antwerp towards Brussels is not operated by
Not,
us. No.
not only. So that, I think that's the great thing that
Yeah.
they get a lot of passengers.
Yeah, that's the exclusive right of Thalys. Yeah, so that's why they're doing well.
Is there any punishment on the government's mistake?
Yes, at two stages. First of all, when the construction was done, actually during the construction it was very clear that the project was completely out of control, and there had been inquiry by the parliament, which is probably the heaviest tool they have to call responsibility from the government. So they did all this research, and you have the hearings, the formal hearings, where basically it looks like a court case, but there is no court outcome, or you cannot how to sue a minister, so to speak. But the result is not that someone got punished as such, rather than that agencies have been put under stricter control. So many more control mechanisms have to be built in. There are many more obligations now regarding feasibility studies, environmental impact assessment, social cost benefit analysis. They have to be rechecked again. So there are lots of those extra control mechanisms. The parliament itself has been given new rights for doing such research, and also have received more support. So when the government proposes a big project, parliament has the right to call on their own support to do counter research. That's the result of the problems during the construction. As for the problems with operation, the parliamentary inquiry will start somewhere this summer, I guess. That will be June or July, somewhere around that time. I don't know what the results will be, but I know that it will again be a very strict procedure. Will be quite interesting to watch. And I'm very fortunate to I'm allowed to help the Commission, so I'll be looking forward to it actually.
I have another question.
Sure.
Are there any other high-speed train that travel in that short distance within Europe, within the same country? And how do they perform if there are?
No. The other high-speed trains usually cover much longer distances. In Germany there are some shorter distances, but I'm not sure you could consider them high speed because the top speed is limited to 200 or 220, something like that. A project like this that allows for very high speed at a very short distance, no.
What about the Antwerp to Brussels?
Antwerp to Brussels is still regular tracks, and I'm not going to be upgraded anytime soon. The distance is way too short. The Belgians also run out of money. They don't have money to build anything for that part. And also, looking at the Dutch example, I don't think they will build anything in the future.
Any more questions?
Except the financial problem, are there any technical problems?
With the trains or the construction?
Operating system.
The operating system. It works right now. So the European train control system works, and it works without any major problems. It works quite well. So the Thalys train sets, which is the TGV from France, just reworked, they have this control system implemented, and there are no problems with that. So that's pretty reliable. Thalys is doing very well with that. That goes for all the electronics equipment that is implemented. However, it took a very long while to get there. The 2.0 version had been developed along the way, so it works now, but it hasn't worked for many years. So there were many problems. Another problem was it uses very high power output, 25 kilovolt, and that disrupted many electronics of the regular tracks. And I spent years trying to find out why this was and what had to be done, building new substations for directing electricity. It works right now, except for this, of course. This is not going to work.
How about the performance of the system? For example, the reliability or safety?
Safety complies to all standards and works very well. And reliability, the availability of the tracks, that means reliable and safety operation, is still above 97%. So it works right now. It just took us 15 years longer to get there than we expected.
Level of service very high.
Sorry?
Level of service.
In that regard, it's very high. Yeah, that was the demand from the start onwards because it's such an expensive project. Yeah.
So, in my opinion, it's a very good system.
It is. We should have new trains.
So the problem is a financial problem.
Basically, if so, and what happens right now is that the government is considering to put it out to tender again, to start over again, and see what other market parties can help with. Parties who actually own good trains that can work with this system, and perhaps they can do a better job.
Yeah. So you should rearrange the management system.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a very good thing. Not bad.
No, I mean, rearrangement is really necessary. And as I said, just when I left Amsterdam for Bangkok, this just started. People started talking about the position of Ines, of Codel and others. And I think the government is very keen to reorganize the whole system. Absolutely. It will happen in the short run. Yeah.
Because in this system, there's no corruption. So very easy to manage.
In the operations, I would say it's very clean. There had been one case of corruption actually during the building of the substructure where some companies did price fixing. So but that's in the construction phase, not in operation.
May I ask about the cost? Maybe the cost of the concession fee that the Dutch government has collected from the concessionaire, is that enough to pay the maintenance cost or track maintenance cost of that?
Yeah, it covers the maintenance, but it does not cover the cost of Boville, who will safeguard the signals.
But given that thing that on assumption that the NS can pay the full
of course, yes. NS and Thalys and Eurostar. Yeah.
Yeah, but it seems that NS couldn't pay more in the future. Then what will be happening?
So right now, Thalys is expanding its services and will start to take over the train paths that were assigned to NS. Eurostar will do the same, will take over the train paths that were assigned to NS. In the long run, I can see other competitors also running certain sections, and as such slowly replace all the train paths that have been reserved for NS.
But it seems that Thalys and Eurostar really pay less than NS. Right?
Only because they do fewer services. If you just look at the number of passengers, oh, sorry, never mind. Okay, never mind. If you look at the number of passengers, it seems pretty low, but Thalys has 10 trains in each direction per day. NS has 2 trains per hour in each direction. So NS has many more services, and as such, they have to pay more. That's all. Yeah.
What happens if you scrap the whole project and then let all your trains operate in the same line instead of just scrap the whole high-speed rail project? What happens?
And then let them run on the old tracks, the existing network. And this believes it will be chaos. This is hard to assess, and we've been looking into that. So, actually, there's a term for that. I don't know the English term, but we have looked into the extent to which multiple companies can run on the same track on the existing network. And it seems, from the point of view of the infrastructure provider, no problem at all. It can be done. Infrastructure provider assigns train paths to certain companies. It doesn't really matter who does it. And NS is afraid of losing their position, so they argue that passengers will be confused. If they travel from Rotterdam to Amsterdam, they want to know that the train is their train and not choose different providers or different price tickets. They just want one fixed price and use the same train they've been used for all those years. That's what NS argues. Right now, there's no situation where this has happened. We only have seen situations in the Netherlands where other train operators took over the service, not next to it, but took over. That was seamless. So that worked, and it kind of suggests that running together could also work. Again, from the point of view from the infrastructure provider and the way the system works, if a train operating company has a train that has been approved for the Netherlands, no problem. No problem. It will be an interesting experiment, actually.
Is there any country in Europe that have multiple trains, multiple companies running on the same track?
Germany, for example.
And it works very well.
It works. Technically speaking, it's not difficult, really. It's just a matter of assigning train paths to a certain company.
Do passengers know the different companies and in fact choose?
Oh yes, so what happens in Germany is that there's a low-cost provider operating next to Deutsche Bahn, and they provide less service, but it's much cheaper. So people have a choice.
Like airline.
Exactly. And the extent to which passengers are confused about it, I don't know, but I haven't seen any reports where this might be mentioned as a problem. Of course, Deutsche Bahn doesn't really like it, but that's an entirely different matter.
TC about studies and so on. Who are the feasibility?
Yeah. So who were the ones who did the feasibility studies? Originally, this was done by CBS, this is the Central Bureau for Statistics, which is a government agency that provided lots of data, and much of the calculation had been done by Chorus, which is a financial consultant who has very close ties to the government and calculating it. In the second phase, McKinsey was asked.
Who was the one who did decisions hiring these companies?
This is standard procedure. The ministry assigns the research work, yeah. But this was a standard procedure back in those days. It was not that super common to ask many companies to move. McKinsey was asked to do the second judgment, second opinion. They worked with different materials, set the same data, different models, they came to different conclusions. And later on, also the university started to chime in and showing their results. So the Technical University of Delft also had done some calculations. So it started very simple and rolled it down. This is a decision that the minister takes.
For the question about the speed of this train,
sure.
You mentioned that the track has been designed like to accept the 300 kilometers per hour.
Yeah.
But actually the train can reach only around nearly 250 something.
Yeah.
And the rest is the waste.
Yeah.
Why does it happen?
This is interesting. This is what happens in the mind of policymakers. So first they design for the highest possible speed. They haven't looked into the specifications of the train. They just think 300 is high. And then they sell the argument saying that 300 offers maximum flexibility in operation. You can run 300, you can 250, 160, whatever you like. So it offers the promise of flexibility. In reality, exactly. You know, in reality, when the trains could never reach that 300 kilometers per hour. So, or only on paper. As for example, the Thalys train, they run with 2 motor cars, no distributed traction, 2 motor cars, and it's just slow in acceleration. That's very high top speed, but it just takes time to accelerate. And at such a short distance, it doesn't really matter. For the V250, it can accelerate faster, but then it has a slower top speed. And the traffic time is approximately the same. You know, the differences are sometimes within a minute, which is really not that much for such an investment. Yeah. But in the future, should anybody be able to build a train that runs 300 kilometers per hour and does super fast acceleration, you could use it.
Yeah. How much of the cost difference between this track building of the 250 and the 300?
I don't know the exact numbers, but it's huge. Reason being regulations that say 300 and up have to build extra safety measures. Again, same goes for the trains as well. Up until 199, you have a certain safety regime. From 200 onwards, you get a different safety regime, and the trains become more expensive. The same goes for the tracks. Lots of money has been put into the safety procedures and other measures for protecting noise. It was considerably more expensive. Sure.
I'm not interested in the decision making your policy, whoever that usually ministers, members of the parliament. Take a minister. First, you have a very large staff. You read the consultants report, eating the technical materials. You seem to suggest that we make some rather stupid decisions. There should be some filtering, right, of information. Yeah. If I was sitting there, I want somebody to pass through a very heavy consultant report. But I have to look at other things, a whole lot of other things.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that question. And to answer this question, I have to look a bit into the history of the government in the Netherlands. In the 1990s, much of the knowledge was crowded out, so to speak. In the past, of course, NS and Probably were part of the ministry, so much knowledge about how rail systems work was within the ministry. In the late 1980s, early 1990s, it was all separated, put at more distance from the ministry, and the people with that knowledge went with those agencies, but did not stay at the ministry. So the ministry itself became more accustomed to putting the research out to other companies, and then your question is, did they have the ability to judge the results? History suggests that this may not have been the case. Then again, I should also mention that part of it is the policy making, part of it is political fighting. Who gets what? Certain parties preferring this could exchange their preferences for other parties. And that has happened a lot actually, and that explains part of why this has happened. And also, no, I mean that is the main reason. As for the ministers themselves, they usually don't stay that long to manage the whole project from beginning to the end. Most ministers change after 4 years, 8 years maximum. This is 20 years. We've seen many 5 or 6 ministers, and some of them have an impact at a certain point in time, but they don't know how the end result will be. And the next minister takes up from there and then moves into another direction. That's the political dynamics of that. Politics were pretty important in why this has come about.
So that seems to be a question.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
We want this project regardless.
Regardless, and it's interesting to see that in the original plan that NS.
Because the feasibility study was not very clear, didn't show very good results.
No, the original feasibility study was pretty bad actually, and it's only because of the public consultation, the fact that other people could look at it and give comment to it, and even take government to court if necessary. That was the only reason why the original studies were sent back to the government and had to redo their homeworks. And what I found
bad meaning that it showed bad results or just bad results?
Sorry, but
it showed bad results or it was bad results?
both. Both. So the methods were criticized and the outcomes were criticized. Yeah.
And the first acceptable study was not also very good.
The first somewhat acceptable feasibility study showed that the project was not feasible. Right? So, but then political decision making took over, and then it was about certain very different things. The extent to which a political party could stay in power using this. I would love to show you this old map that NS. This is what NS originally came up with 40 years ago, and in this it really said that 300 kilometers per hour was not necessary. They could upgrade, build some new lines, run 250 kilometers. So the original idea was actually not that bad, but from there it kind of went out of control.
I have a question about the electric power. Do you need to prepare for like a more power plant or high-speed train when you get started the project?
Sorry, could you?
I'm wondering, did you prepare for the electric power to build the high-speed trains in the country, or you just use the electricity?
Oh, sorry, power. I was thinking about political power.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, oh, sure. Yeah, so actually most of the regular network is electrified. The high-speed railway and another line that runs from here to here using for freight trains run on 25 kilovolt, which is completely different from the regular network. The regular network is 1500 volts. And for doing this, they build extra power generation to feed into the trains. And that's the only way to reach those top speeds, because the 1500 volts are way too low to get a train to run at high speed. The reason why the regular networks at 1500 volts is that you can do track maintenance while you can keep the electricity switched on. You don't need to switch off the electricity during maintenance. That's the only reason why it's such a low voltage on the regular network. This was not possible on the high-speed network. Yeah.
I'm Breda from Chiang Mai University. I would like to know about financial aspects. In the feasibility study, are there how many sources of revenue that they think about the high-speed rail? I mean, fare box or other non-fare box? Do they include in the studies or it? And one more thing is, in reality, you explain that there are so many developed area around the stations, and what happened, what is the effects on the revenue?
Yeah, so for the operation, that was purely based on the revenues gained from collecting the fares for passengers. As for the project as a whole, the construction of the project, revenues came of course in from concessionaires, but also there have been many attempts to get revenues in from land development, property development. Also, we're very optimistic about that. For example, NS owns quite a bit of land around this area, and they thought that by building this new station and then the price of the land would increase, the value of the land would increase, and then therefore they could build better property and sell at high prices. In the long run, that did not really happen at all. What happened was that, yes, the value went up of the existing buildings, and but at this moment there's no one who can make a business case for building new property along the line. So in that respect, it failed. So there were high expectations. Reality, no, it didn't really happen. Same goes for the other stations along the track. Same thing happened. Again, basically most of the modifications come from the government itself. There had been this idea that revenues could also come in from not flying between Amsterdam and Paris, so by transferring passengers from the airplane into the trains, basically channeling that stream of money into the trains, which is one of the reasons why NS teamed up with Air France KLM in operating that. The extent to which that has happened is unclear at this moment. There are some indications that indeed passengers are doing that, but only because Air France KLM sells tickets for that, and not for airplanes, but only for trains. Yeah. So just as last comment, the wider business case in terms of revenues from connected developments, not very good. That's right.
I have another financial question. So you say that this fast high-speed train is as a substitute for the existing train, right?
Correct.
And so how does that have an impact on the financial statements of the existing track? And is it owned by the government as well?
The tracks are owned and run by Probil, the infrastructure provider. And yes, it impacts the regular operations, but then again, that is also NS. See, so yes, and then the mother company loses money there, but the subsidiary makes more money, and it just goes.
So there would be no competition between the two companies.
Exactly. And this is one of the failures of putting it out to tender to a non-market party who already has an existing position there. It doesn't really balance out. And there have been ample discussions to the extent to which NS should be punished and should be sacked, removed from the concession. But the ministry would lose a lot of money for that because they would lose their income. But as long as NS keeps going, the ministry also loses money because NS cannot pay and they own NS in the long run. So.
Would there be any other bidder that would want to take on this track?
Oh yes, absolutely. There have been many unsolicited proposals for the last year, since early 2013, and among others from Virgin Rail, Deutsche Bahn has popped up again from Germany. You have to understand that from a business side of the story, this does make a lot of sense. emotionally, I think many political parties and many people would really hesitate to have a German company run on the Dutch tracks, something like that. You know, it's I don't know, it's something people just don't like.
Yeah, probably a little bit.
Sorry?
Which is
Sure, certainly. Yeah, like Thalys, which looks very neutral, but actually is France-German. But certainly, I mean, there's no rational explanation for this. It's just something that people feel strange about. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, the German part I can understand. I was in Holland about 15 years after the war.
Right. Yeah, that's the sensitive issue. Yeah, but in general, people love NS, believe that railways should be run by a national company, even if there is no rationale for that.
That's unusual. Railway company that people love.
Yeah. Well, people love to hate it, I think.
probably about the question about that concessionaire by the NS.
Yeah.
It seems that all the trains are grounded at the moment.
Yeah, they are.
And is that possibility that to run that train again, or is just a fact that you have to pull out?
Would you like to buy it?
No, but again, if you would like to, let's say, give a new tender, then what will you do that with this old train?
Yeah, this is a great question. So the trains have been 5 years too late,
Yeah.
and actually after 1 year, you know, they should have stopped the contract, but they kept going. And end of 2012, they were accepted by the authority that gives out the permits, but under pressure to run now. They had to run now because it was the latest moment possible, and they failed completely, as you know. So the question is now, what next? The manufacturer claims that they have a valid contract that cannot be broken, and they will be happy to repair anytime, anywhere, any longer. And this says that it's crap and it should be sent back to where it came from on the basis that you should deliver a good product. So they're standing right now, and this has sent a very beautiful formal letter saying, which was published in the newspaper, saying, please come and pick up your old trains, take them back. And the manufacturer has published an equally polite letter in the newspaper saying, it's not our mistake, you wanted a cheap train, you got one. And this is actually what has been said. So that's the current situation. Could you make them run again? Engineers believe. The question is, how long does it take to get them to run again? And that, you know, given the history of repairs, probably not anywhere soon.
You can ask any other question, but if there are no any question, then I still keep asking.
Go ahead, Sim. Don't have to take questions.
Just raise your hand, please, if you want to ask question. Maybe I'd like to go back to the state where you have the feasibility study, and at that state, then government let private coming in, and no one interested to invest.
Yeah.
In that situation, how well? I mean, the government should have some of the caution about this project already, and why do they behave like go ahead with the project, and what is their argument on going ahead with this project?
So we're in a situation where market parties don't see any chance of doing this, and the government knows that it cannot do it completely on its own. So what it has done is it sought a compromise. And this is a very Dutch thing, to seek a compromise by building the substructure themselves, and then let other companies build the superstructure. And that was the compromise, and that was the explanation that was used in the parliament by that time was, it's too risky to build the substructure, so we do it ourselves. But once we're done with that, the market will step in and solve all the other problems. That was the argument that was used about it. But I fully agree with your comment when you said that if no market party is interested, then there should be cause for alarm. I fully agree with that, and it's interesting to see that this hasn't happened, or that people were at the ministry were too focused on getting it done. Yeah, I fully agree.
Any other question? I think this because it's for this presentation, I think for myself, even I'm doing the research in the Dutch railway a little bit, not a little bit, but for some length. But still, because of the Dutch situation, is usually described in the Dutch language, not in English, so it's very difficult to find information. So when we contact each other, and then he said that he want to present the case of the high-speed rail in the Dutch, then I said that will be very nice information that we will have, and we can see and we can learn a lot. Even though that we can think that the Dutch is very well planning, advanced in modeling everything, econometrics, traffic model and everything, and they can do such wrong things like this.
Absolutely.
So that it's very good to learn from them how they can go this wrong. And again, what would you recommend if would you like to change something along this line of the planning and things? What are you thinking is, what is your comment if you can go back in time and change something of this project? What is a critical thing that you need to change?
Yeah, I believe that many problems stem from the idea, from the narrow focus that the government had, that the high-speed train should be built and it should look like this. And that was a very early decision already back in 1979, if I remember correctly. And other than that, after that, they didn't change the scope much. And that causes a lot of blind spot. And that causes feasibility studies that look pretty bad. And if they hadn't had that narrow focus, the feasibility studies would have taken into account many more options and many more versions and would have been much more realistic. As you saw, this first round of the feasibility studies was rejected in any aspect. All aspects were wrong. So, and that comes from that narrow focus. And I believe that if you don't have that narrow focus, and if you do the feasibility studies being open focus and in consultation with the public, being open about the numbers that underlie the model, being open about the assumptions that are there in the data and in the model, then the end result will be much better. You may not end up building a high-speed railway, you may end up building an upgrade to the existing track, but from financial, economically, perhaps even social point of view, this may be a better outcome than the very expensive thing that you have here right now. So being open to many other views is probably the most important thing here.
Any other questions? Yes.
You mentioned about the feasibility studies. I'm just curious, like after like finishing feasibility studies, do the public knows about the result? Say, is there any comment from the media or from academia about this project?
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. So again, the feasibility study is an open procedure. It cannot be done within the ivory tower of the ministry. It has to be open. That's by law required. So certainly, companies or consultants or any agency is allowed to work with the model, but they have to present the whole thing out in the open and into consultation. Everybody, direct stakeholders, have a right to look into the documents and comment on it and give alternative views, and you can even challenge them in court if you can make clear that the assumptions underlying the models are not good. Right? And this was something that happened in the first round of the studies, because, for example, the government said, okay, the track's going to run here, this means we're going to have to buy your land and you have a track next to your backyard. And people can challenge that in court, not on the premise of just having a track in your backyard, but they can challenge assumptions underlying the decision to build the train there. And that's very important. This is a legal procedure. That's part of the law on spatial development. And there are ample public participation opportunities. Actually, it's also criticized from a certain point of view, because some people say it takes too much time to listen to all the hearings, to all the people. But I believe that, personally, that it leads to a better plan in the long run. Maybe not that quick, but in the long run, it can be better. I hesitate to think about the consequences if the original plan had been executed. I don't know what would have happened then, but that probably would have been a bigger disaster. Yeah.
So it means that the comments from, say, the public it's not quite influential to the government, so they still can continue the project?
As long, okay. Yes or no? Okay, this is hard to explain in a nutshell. No, from a legal point of view, everybody is allowed to comment, and if you can reason, if your grounds, your arguments against the plan are reasonable, the court, the constitutional court, can reject the plans by the government, and this has happened before many times. There had been a plan to build an airport in the sea, in the North Sea. It has been rejected based on that. There have been plans to build another high speed to the east. They have been rejected on the basis of that. High speed to the north have been rejected on the basis of that. That people, citizens just like you and me, would argue that the foundation for the decision was not sound, and the court rejected it. So that's one part. The other part of the story, of course, is that if you're in power, and you have a lot of political power, and you have enough money to hand out sweeteners to other political parties, you may be able to force the decision. And this has happened once with the freight railways from the port of Rotterdam to Germany. This is where people have been forced to accept a decision. Highly controversial, and I don't think that anybody's going to do that anytime soon again, because it's political suicide. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
May I ask about the political party in the Dutch system?
Sure.
Do they have changed power recently, or do they have usually have only one party that dominates everything?
No. As for the political system, it's always a coalition system, so there's no party who can hold a majority vote. So the government is composed usually of 2, 3, perhaps even 4 parties, and they change regularly. Quite a lot at the moment right now. But the system where one party stays in power for many years, like in some other countries now.
As you know something like that, in Thailand, we are going to do the same thing. I mean, we are going to repeat what happened to you in 1980. Probably we are talking about the 2 billion baht projects, and a majority of that will go to the high-speed rail project. And many people say that we are going to repeat the same common errors, optimism bias, or narrow focus, or no comparison, and probably finally politics wins over reason. We used to put this project under the PPP concept, and no private companies interested in this. That we show that probably they have something strange about the high-speed rail project. And now, as you know, we are going to repeat the same thing. Do you have any comments about the probably on our politics, because we have one party and probably control everything.
Right. So, as far as I have to be careful about, I don't know the exact workings of the Thai system, of course. So, let me just say that we paid a huge price for the mistakes that we have made, an enormous price in terms of money, in terms of dissatisfaction, also political dissatisfaction, people losing faith in the ability of the government to pull off a plan like this. And that's a very high price. And the question is that worth paying for such a prestigious project? And looking at the common opinion right now in the ministry, with the train operating companies, with the infrastructure provider, they all agree that it had been a bad idea. And they would rather do the upgrade of the existing tracks, perhaps add a few things here and there, move the top speed to 200 kilometers per hour, something like that. Everybody now agrees that that would have been much better. And so, if you intend on doing this, something like this, I would suggest to be very open about the assumptions underlying the calculations, the models in the feasibility studies, and to reassess the extent to which a high-speed train is really necessary. One thing I find very interesting in the Netherlands is that at one point in time it became a matter of national pride. We have to have this train. And I cannot find a real reason for that. And it's just a very expensive way of showing that you've got a train. You know, like small children do when they buy the train set. And as a Dutch citizen paying Dutch tax money, I'd rather not have my government do something like that. You know, I buy my own train if I want to show it off. So tread carefully here and be open about the plans. That's what I would recommend. And perhaps you end up in a completely different position, upgrading the existing railway, for example, or I don't know, any other alternative. But then in the long run, that may be much better than by building a high-speed train without any sound foundations.
Any other question? Probably, well, if we finish this question, then I would like to thank you all of the participants that come in here and listen to Dr. Lasse for this presentation. And also on behalf of the TDRI, we'd like to thank Dr. Gerrits on presenting this information to us, and I think it will be very fruitful for us to think and to rethinking about what we want to have in Thailand in the near future. That would be the key idea. Probably could you please give us a round of applause to Dr. Gerrits?